Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of One Piece Season 2, and I want to thank everybody who's been waiting patiently, and a few not so patiently, for my review of this season. Last week I had a lot on deck with the Oscars, but I was super excited to review this season because I enjoyed Season 1, it was my introduction to One Piece, and I really wanted to see what Season 2 had in store. Now, as I said in my review for Season 1, I have not watched the anime series and I have not read the manga. I am a live-action viewer only, so I'm judging this more as an adventure show than as an adaptation. But I have watched a little bit more anime since the first season came out, so I think I'm a little bit more familiar with some of the anime influences, but definitely not well-versed. Most of this review will have to do with specific episodes and spoilers, but in general, I just want to say that I really enjoyed this season, maybe even more than the first season. I think this is an exceptionally well-cast show with likable characters being portrayed by good actors, and I love how it embraces the zaniness of what's going on. There's no apology for anything. Everything is pumped up to an 11, and the show is able to juggle that chaotic energy with some genuinely emotional moments. I had a really good time with this season, and I want to break it down a lot more. Now, because Season 2 is done in pods of mostly 1 or 2 episodes, I'm going to talk about the season roughly in order, while jumping ahead here or there to share some thoughts. Also, because I do want to keep this review at a manageable length, I won't be able to mention every single character this season. That's not to slight them, it's just to distill things down to my biggest takeaways. And as always, I'll be doing my best with pronunciation, so bear with me. So let's start with episode 1 of this second season, which brought us back to Loguetown, the site of Gold Roger's execution and the beginning of the hunt for the One Piece. Early on, we get a flashback where Gold Roger asks Monkey D. Garp to find and look after his son, and towards the end of the episode, it's implied heavily that Luffy is Gold Roger's son.
That laugh. Roger.
Now, I don't know if he is or isn't, like I said, I don't know the source material, but that seems like a pretty big reveal to drop this early in the season and the series, should it continue on for multiple seasons. Maybe Luffy is Gold Roger's son, but I'm smelling a misdirect here. Speaking of Luffy, I have to say again that I think that Iñaki Godoy is cast so perfectly in this role. His energy is so singular and so weird.
Especially for a pirate with a bounty as high as yours.
You know about my bounty?
But it matches up perfectly with how Luffy is written. He's such a likable character. He's childlike in a lot of ways, but he's earnest and loyal. He's trusting to a fault, but that's also one of his biggest strengths. And I think that he is a great anchor for the rest of this crew. No pun intended. What I loved about this season is that we also got a lot of development for the rest of the crew, and Zoro got an extended sequence in the first episode in the sword shop where he discovers that one of his swords is one of the 21 great blades and acquires 2 other powerful blades. I loved the actor James Hiroyuki Lau as Ippon Matsu, the sword salesman who begins as kind of a typical ripoff artist, but eventually respects Zoro and his skill with the blade. We also met Julia Rewald as Tashigi in this scene. I really liked this as an introduction to her character, but I felt like she was mostly sidelined after this first episode, along with the Marines in general. Kobe and Garp were barely present after such a big presence in the first season, and I can only imagine that they're going to have bigger roles down the line, down the Grand Line, if you will. The most present Marine throughout this season was Smoker, who was teased at the end of Season 1, and I thought that he was an entertaining antagonist for the Straw Hats, especially in the big fight scene at the end of this first episode. His devil fruit powers of turning into smoke are pretty cool, and I look forward to seeing more of him in the future. I know that there's a lot of fan casting for this role, but I think Callum Kerr did a pretty good job in what was basically an introductory season for him. And of course, I have to mention the return of Buggy and Alvida from Season 1, Looking for Revenge. Buggy in particular is such a great character, and I have to heap praise on Jeff Ward once again for his portrayal. His acting as Buggy really does remind me of like peak 90s Jim Carrey, and I think it's a consistently funny performance.
It's Buggy the Clown. That's not what you say. Oh, God, I forgot how annoying you are.
I understand that the show is adapting a lot, it's condensing a lot, and it has to fit so many characters into each season, but I was sad that we only got just a little bit of Buggy this season. Episode 2 found the Straw Hats finally entering the Grand Line via the Reverse Mountain, which I thought was a really good sequence. Generally, I think the show has done a good job of not overextending itself budget-wise. I know they have a pretty high budget, but they're able to make a sequence like this suitably epic and then keep others more contained in order to keep that quality consistent. Also, if there's ever a One Piece theme park ride built here in the US, the Reverse Mountain Log Flume is an absolute no-brainer. Immediately after entering the Grand Line, we get our first really emotional story of the season involving a whale named Laboon mourning his abandonment by his previous crew. I know that these stories originated in both comic form and anime, but the show did a really good job of adapting it for a first-time viewer like me because I found it really touching. And I think this is a good litmus test for the show overall. If you find getting emotionally involved in a story about a whale ridiculous, then you're probably not going to be on board for the rest of the series. The Mary's crew is trapped inside Laboon, leading to one of my favorite jokes of the season.
To poke that big punching bag looking thing on the roof of his mouth.
The uvula?
So it's a girl whale.
Nami really is a great source of dry humor, a lot of good reactions to the other characters. She's really played well by Emily Rudd, but I think that Zoro is still my favorite character. McKinyu has such a strong presence despite rarely showing a lot of emotion. It's all under the surface, which makes it even more meaningful when it bubbles up to the surface. And I think that you can see his character open up a lot more as this season goes on.
But I brought you breakfast.
We're cool.
With the crew inside Laboon's acid-filled stomach, Luffy is outside trying to figure out how to get his crew back, and I love that the ultimate solution involved Luffy reaching out and making a connection, using his big heart instead of his fists. And speaking of big hearts, Crocus is another character in the show who starts off gruff, but eventually proves to be a useful ally and a good person. Plus, I guess he knows where the One Piece is, which is kind of another big reveal to drop this early.
The one who will make it to Laugh Tale and find the One Piece.
Episode 3 was the first really big action episode of the season. The crew lands on Cactus Island and visits the town of Whiskey Peak, where the locals seem friendly, but are actually assassins in league with Baroque works to kill pirates. I loved that reveal where it showed that all of the spikes on the Cactus Mountains are actually pirate tombstones. That was pretty cool. Zoro really gets to show off his advancing swordsmanship skills here, and I like how they kept Mihawk, who beat him back in Season 1, present in the show, not just as Zoro's motivation, but as an internal vision that taunts him about not being good enough. A lot of this season explored the insecurities of the crew, and I thought that this is a creative way to show us what Zoro is thinking, because he's a character who doesn't really betray much on the outside. I also have to praise how the action is shot in the show. A lot of these action scenes are done in long, swooping shots that really showcase the choreography and the stunt performers. There's not much shaky cam or quick cutting to be found. It makes those scenes feel really impressive and dynamic. I talked about the show introducing us to a bunch of characters in Season 2, and two of them were Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday, who at first seemed to just be two in a series of assassins trying to kill the Straw Hats. But in this episode, we learn that Miss Wednesday is actually Princess Vivi of Alabasta, who was spying on Baroque works to find out who's trying to bring down her kingdom from the inside. I thought that Charithra Chandran really did a good job in this role, playing a character who's tough when she needs to be, but is also very naturally sensitive to the needs of others, very caring. I've read subsequent to the season that apparently there was some backlash to her casting in this role, but now that the season is out and done, in my opinion, I think that she was fantastic, and I think that maybe the people that were doing the backlash look a little sillier than they already did. Vivi is a great addition to the crew, and it was nice to have that surprise reveal because I wasn't aware of who Miss Wednesday was until this third episode. Shout out to Igaram as well, Vivi's loyal royal guard who can also play a mean saxophone. As noble deaths go, you don't get much cooler than taking on assassins with the guns hidden in your powdered wig. A lot of these episodes explore one particular crew member's flaws and how they either work to improve themselves or learn that their flaws are actually a strength. And in this episode, for me, it was Luffy's trusting nature. It looks like it's betrayed him when Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine escape, but by the end, it turns out that Luffy's gut was really telling him that Miss Wednesday / Vivi was someone who needed help. And Luffy's willingness to help those in need is his real superpower.
Did you figure out what your gut was telling you about her?
She needed help.
Episode 4 takes us to Little Garden, and this puts a spotlight on another thing I love about the show, the fact that every new adventure feels completely different from the one before. We jump from Pirate Town to Old West to prehistoric jungle to snowy medieval town. I'm sure this is how the animated series and the source material did it, but it would be so easy to cut down on that variety in live action in order to save money. Instead, this series embraces it, which makes it feel unique, even amongst other adventure shows on TV. I didn't know that I needed to see Sanji and Zoro fight a T-Rex, but I absolutely did, even if we don't get much of the fight. Luckily, we got even more entertainment out of their debate over who actually killed the dinosaur.
You think you killed a Tyrannosaurus Rex with a kick?
You just saw me do exactly that.
And while the T-Rex was digital, a lot of what we saw on Little Garden was a mix of practical and digital effects, which I love. The giants, Buggy and Dory, for example, probably would have been all digital creations in most shows, but it looked like, to me, that they were actors in costume with some digital enhancements, which made them feel more real. And they were often made to look like giants through simple photography tricks like shooting them from below or using small props. It worked without looking cheap, even though it probably was a lot cheaper than doing a bunch of CGI. Sometimes the old ways just work better, and One Piece I think was really good at picking and choosing practical and digital effects this season. Also, I would totally watch a spin-off show with Buggy and Dory just on the island arguing and dueling all day because they were awesome.
May good fortune be with you!
Together, episodes 4 and 5 told what I think was my favorite arc of the season, where Usopp learns that being brave doesn't mean that you're without fear. He's forced to step up to the moment, and he delivers, which feels like great progression for his character. And props to Jacob Romero-Gibson, who's usually comic relief in this role, but really played Usopp's struggle with having to be the hero well. I think Usopp actually took my favorite journey of any character across the entire season.
A warrior's fear is a good thing. It means you care. Gives you purpose.
The entire Straw Hat cast actually got to do some good acting in these 2 episodes, courtesy of Miss Golden Week, whose paints can alter your emotional state. Zoro, Nami, and Luffy were all affected, which meant that each of those actors had to basically play their characters the opposite of how they usually do. And it's easy to take that for granted if you're just taking in the show on a story level, but that's actually a pretty tough acting challenge, and I think that all 3 stepped up nicely. We also met maybe my favorite villain of the season in episodes 4 and 5, David Dismalchian's Mr. 3. If you need an entertaining weirdo with an edge, he has to be one of the first actors you call.
Gifted with such glorious devil fruit abilities, yet how do they choose to use them? As killers for hire.
A lot of the devil fruit powers, which everyone seemingly has this season, feel kind of similar, if I'm honest. But I liked Mr. 3's ability to generate wax and his commitment to bringing the Baroque to Baroque works. His plan to slowly turn the Straw Hats into wax statues was both cartoonish enough for the show and also kind of terrifying. Speaking of cartoonish, by episode 5, it says a lot about this show that an otter shows up riding a vulture strapped with miniguns, and it doesn't feel the least bit surprising. There is so much more to break down about this second season, but before we do, I'm going to thank the sponsor for this video, Factor. The winter storms have mostly passed, which means it's time to start filling your schedule up with springtime activities like enjoying the outdoors and shoveling snow if you're in a place where the winter storms haven't passed yet. But a busy schedule shouldn't stop you from eating well, and that is where Factor comes in. Factor meals are full of quality, functional ingredients like lean proteins and healthy fats that fit your goals no matter what they are, whether that's eating healthier or adding protein to your diet. They arrive at your door always fresh, never frozen, and they're ready to eat in about 2 minutes. On next week's menu, you can get dishes like grilled filet mignon with crispy Parmesan shrimp, alongside meals like teriyaki shredded chicken, and one of my favorites, the queso poblano chicken. And variety is never a problem because Factor has 100 rotating weekly meals, including the new Muscle Pro collection, which supports strength and recovery. I have a really weird, unpredictable schedule, and it's always good to know that I have some Factor meals in the fridge that are going to be ready to eat when I'm able to eat. It takes a lot of the stress out of the day. Head to factormeals.com/Murrell50off and use code Murrell50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. That's factormeals.com/Murrell50off with code Murrell50off. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. So episode 5 ends with Usopp getting his big hero moment, stepping into battle and saving the crew, and Luffy once again shows his big heart by promising to take Vivi back to Alabasta to save her people and expose the identity of Mr. Zero, the head of Baroque Works.
I can't ask you to take me.
You didn't have to.
But things get derailed when Nami falls ill from an insect bite, which takes us into our last arc of the season in the wintry Drum Kingdom. The last major villain is King Wapol, maybe the most cartoonish villain of the season, which is really saying something. Again, I like that the show embraced that cartoonishness, even down to the practical metal jaw that King Wapol had. He was kind of a neat final boss.
If it's action you want, princess, allow me to apply!
A big strength of season 2 was that the dynamics between characters were really well done this season, even with the new characters, and I love how Vivi has become one of the only people who can really understand Luffy and break through his impulsive nature, a bit self-destructive, as she did when the crew was approaching the village gates.
Your impulsiveness will not solve anything. If you get us killed here, what will happen to Nami? You are the captain. Think!
We also got a great look at Usopp's growth when he stands up to Zoro's moping, telling him to go do something useful with himself.
We should go up there right now.
Zoro, do something else. Like I'm doing something.
And I'm catching some serious sparks between Nami and Sanji this season, although I was actually catching sparks between almost all the other main characters as well. That scene where Sanji opens up about his past and how his cooking started as an expression of love while serving Nami food was really emotional.
But then came the day where I didn't have to make any more lunches.
Taz Skylar is another one of the main cast who's mostly tasked with comic relief, but did some really strong dramatic acting in that scene, and Emily Rudd was a great scene partner. And of course, how could I not mention the other new crew member this season, Tony Chopper, the young talking reindeer who's sure to kick off a slew of, as Mel Brooks's yogurt would say,
Merchandising! Merchandising!
I remember when Netflix first teased season 2 and they had Chopper as the centerpiece, but I had no context for the character at that time. Having seen him now, I think he's a great character who's both adorable and has a great backstory. One anime convention that I have learned more about over the last couple years is the extended backstory episode, and the 8th episode was almost entirely devoted to Chopper and how he was saved by the exiled Dr. Hiruluk and raised as his son. Dr. Hiruluk was played by, bizarrely, an actor named Mark Herelick, who's been a journeyman actor since the 1990s, and it's crazy how this show can find mostly unknown actors and cast them in roles that they are perfect for, because he was really great in the role.
Hoist this flag and fight like a pirate!
The other exiled doctor, Correa, was played by Katie Siegel, who's a lot more well-known, but was equally as good. I think she had the exact right kind of attitude for the character as written.
Only 2 ways a patient leaves my care, girlie. Fully recovered or dead.
I wouldn't have thought that I would find the backstory about a talking reindeer emotionally resonant, but this show can do weird things to you because Chopper's story was heartbreaking. I thought it was especially tragic that after Dr. Hiruluk taught Chopper that the skull and crossbones was a sign of hope, that every disease could be cured, that you need to keep fighting, that Chopper brought back a poisonous mushroom to heal Dr. Hiruluk because he mistook the poison sign in the medical book for a label that the mushroom was a cure-all. I mean, that's the kind of tragic irony you see in Shakespeare.
The skull and crossbones means anything is possible. Any disease can be cured.
But Chopper isn't all tragedy. He's also a pretty funny character with kind of a potty mouth.
Good afternoon.
Good after... shit.
He's also a great fit with the Straw Hats, who are all misfits in their own way, and I love how he was immediately able to bond with Luffy, who turned the pirate flag from a symbol of shame for Chopper into a symbol of pride. Chopper is also, I think, another example of a good mix of CG and practical effects. When he grows into a warrior reindeer, we go from full digital to prosthetic so that he's physically there fighting alongside everybody else. I know some people weren't a fan of that. I actually enjoyed it. The final episode was largely a boss battle against King Wapol and his forces, and everybody got their moment to shine, including Vivi.
The suffering of your people shows you know nothing about what it means to lead.
After Wapol is defeated, Chopper gets an official invitation to join the crew, and we end with a really beautiful sequence where Dr. Hiruluk's special illness cure of bringing the beauty of cherry blossoms to the village is finally realized. I have to admit, I was already emotional when the sight of it caused Chopper to just break into tears on the deck of the Mary, but the gut punch was when Zoro was the one to pick him up and comfort him. Leave it to the least emotionally available crew member to be the one to reach out and to really sell their bond as a family, having gone through so much already.
The Going Merry is your home. And we got your back. Always.
Luffy promises to not just take Vivi to Alabasta, but also to help her take her kingdom back. And then we get the reveal of Mr. Zero, aka Sir Crocodile, played by Joe Manganiello. He and Miss All Sunday are set up big time for next season. And Miss All Sunday was actually a constant presence this season that I didn't go that much into. I really enjoyed her, even if her appearances were relatively brief. And that's where we leave it. I mean, this season covered a lot of ground in just 8 episodes, and I'm glad that there are no strikes, fingers crossed, to hold up the 3rd season, which is already shooting. This is just a really fun show, and I'm having fun discovering this story for the first time, even knowing that there are others who have known this stuff for literal decades. But what do you think? Are you also experiencing it for the first time on Netflix, or is this an adaptation experience for you? Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the 2nd season, and stay tuned right here. I'll of course be back with the latest in movie news, reviews, box office, and everything else in the world of entertainment. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. If you're a One Piece fan seeing me for the first time, I'd love for you to stick around. But most of all, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.